So now you know everything we do.
Okay, so you got 4 kids, 2 of which are so pissed off they want to kill you. This is why some people shouldn't have children.
You are such an ass.
I'm direct, sis. There's a difference.
Look, the point is, Nora will come after you too.
Yeah, only if she's as nuts as you say she is.
She is. Trust me.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Either way, I'm not scared of her.
It's not that simple.
You're not that simple.
Oh, brother!
I've always adored the CWDC shows. Are they perfect? Of course not. Do they have way too much drama? Absolutely. But it's just something about seeing your favorite comic book heroes come to life on a TV screen that gets to me. Maybe it's because we watch these heroes go through every season, gaining new abilities and learning more about themselves. Or maybe it's about the reoccurring villains that make for the most entertaining and personal storylines. Whatever it is, it keeps me coming back to watch the next chapter in their adventure every week. For a while anyway. The Flash was always my favorite out of the group, and that remains true because I've literally dropped every other show except for this one, despite its own drop of quality over the years. It's still far from a terrible show, but I feel like it has known how to make the cast interesting for a while, and season 7 is no different. For one, I'm not even going to talk about the first 3 episodes because, being honest, I didn't have one care in the world for the late season 6 ending. To me, there weren't really any stakes. Despite the attack on the city, you could tell that Team Flash wasn't in any danger. Plus, Eva's powers were so broken, you knew Barry wasn't going to be able to outrun this problem, and he would wind up using Naruto's Talk No Jutsu, which is apparently the go-to method now. Kicking off the season with Abracadabra is the weirdest move to me, but I guess we needed some villain of the week to show up, so sure. His only purpose, as always, is to just tease some upcoming villain and then leave. Last time he was talking about Devoa season 3, and then that came to pass in season 4, so it seems that whatever the Chronog is will show up in the next season or later. Anyway, he dies off when we get our first taste of the Strength Force and learn that Barry has no way to beat this thing. And then we get our first taste of the Sage Force and learn that Barry has no way to beat this thing either. And then finally we get our first taste of the Still Force and learn that Barry has no chance in hell to beat these things. Literally the only thing I like in these episodes is Chester and Cisco's duo, but it doesn't even matter because Cisco's leaving anyway. Then we get this 2-episode arc about Frost going to jail, and it's both good and stupid at the same time. I've never seen a more obvious whodunit plot in my life. You introduce this random bartender who knows everything about Frost and put so much focus on him, and now I'm supposed to be surprised when it turns out to be him. They just wanted to do in there so they could have this scene.
So hot in her. Oh.
I actually like that they incorporated the metahuman cure into this courtroom episode because the idea of them forcing it onto metahuman criminals never crossed my mind. It's the kind of moral debate that I wish these shows had more of instead of the useless drama they usually opt for. In the end, Frost goes to jail and Caitlin goes back to doing absolutely nothing in the show. Now we're getting into the stuff that I actually made this video for. In episodes 6 and 7, you get the signs of the storm that is coming later on, when they start to treat the Speed Force, Nora, as a person. Initially, I really have no problem with humanizing the Speed Force. As weird as seeing your dead mother live in the same apartment as you is. However, the show presents this idea to you so that you may think that all the forces are sentient beings with their own emotions and ideas. What it doesn't do is specify how this works for the other forces. Any normal person would just expect all of them to have their own Noras, their own personifications of the force that powers them. So, without this specification, you'll have to think that these forces are separate from the users and must be taken care of. This is where the problem of episode 9, titled Timeless, comes into play. Going into the episode with the information I was given, I assumed, and I'm sure others did too, that the forces were supposed to be a force tied to the user and not be the force itself. So naturally, I'm on Barry's side at the start of this. But why not get rid of the forces? They're basically gods and Barry can't even beat them. And with Nora trying to kill all of them, it would be better just to erase them so the human counterparts don't get killed too. Barry even says that right here.
I'm not killing them. I'm saving them from the forces that took over their lives. Whoever they were before this, they can go back to being those same people again.
But then they start getting weird with it, and it takes me out of the whole show. They go get Wells for their big plan to get rid of the forces, and by the way, Timeless Wells has a very depressing life to me. If he exists throughout time and is conscious of how things have been and will be in his life, does that mean he has to knowingly die to Eobard later on to keep the timeline in order? It's kind of sad if you think about it, but we gotta move on. Everybody's really against Barry, and we get to this point where they start treating the forces like they're actual people. And then Dion shows up and says the most confusing line yet, and I cannot make sense of it.
Not you. Just the force inside.
I am that force!
Are you really though? Are you a person or a force of nature? Before this moment, Alexa, Dion, and Bashir approached this topic very differently, and in my opinion, it served the argument that these people were users of the forces, but not the forces themselves. When Alexa comes on the scene, she doesn't have control of the strange force, and she doesn't even seem to know what it is. Psyche to me is the only one who seems like a force of nature, causing havoc around the city just because he could, but then he has his own score to settle with fellow humans. Dion is literally just a dude that peaked in high school and wants to relive that time. These folks had lives before the forces, and still remember what those lives were after changing. So why is it all of a sudden that now Dion is acting like he is actually a force of nature and not a guy with time-altering abilities? Did he learn some new information, or is that a progress in the minds of people with forces? It's not really explained here, and that's my major problem with this episode. It enforces the notion that Barry is in the wrong here, but we're not really given a strong reason why, because we believe, like Barry does, that the forces are separate from the people. And when it gives us that reason, it's in the middle of the episode and doesn't really have any basis behind it. It really bothers me even more that the comics put in effort to say specifically what these forces were. That they were forces of the universe that used avatars to have their own mythology. Instead, the CW opted for this mix of having both the person and the personified force, but it doesn't really work out. I wish they would have opted for the comic version, or at least have been more clear about their intentions. Then we start getting into my second problem with not only this episode, but the next two that follow. This TV show has a weird thing for putting Barry and Iris in parenting roles without making them actual parents. Like in season 5 when Nora came along. So when Joe talked about the forces as if they were children who can't be punished for the way they are, I wasn't surprised, but I cringed really hard after hearing that. Because just like in season 5, I knew they would make these characters who are about the same age as Barry and Iris act like teenagers who can't keep a snide remark to themselves to save their lives, and have to be ordered around by their so-called parents. And to top it off, they start calling each other mom and dad and brother and sister and siblings. They also start treating each other like family and saying things like, it must be hereditary. It's really weird and I wanted to stop. Thankfully, it only lasts 3 episodes because I could not have gone the rest of the season with this mess of a family. The team recruits Bashir somehow in 1 episode, and then we get to the last episode of this arc, which jumps a couple of sharks and only makes any sense to me because I read the comics. In the storyline Death and the Speed Force is having a negative reaction to the other forces because only one of them was supposed to exist at the time. So it sends out the Black Flash to kill the other forces. Nora is basically doing the same thing here, but instead of affecting just her, it's destroying the universe. And I get this choice. If it was just affecting the Speed Force, the team would have been forced to come up with a plan to stop her, and she would have been the villain of this story. We avoid that by having a bigger problem present itself, so that we can give the forces something to stand against and have a reason to work together. It's just not really well executed. How did we go from saving these forces to saving everything in reality? It's not even saved by the random science mumbo jumbo that they make up. The problem is that there's so much that we don't understand about these forces, so when they say things like, we'll make you even faster than you've gone before, it doesn't make any sense because we don't know how that works. Are they all the Speed Force now? How do these forces even affect the universe the way that they do? I think it would have served that part of the ending better if they delved more into what the forces actually are and what they can do instead of the more drama side of it. But I guess that isn't the show's strong suit. It feels shoehorned to give us this team up moment, and there could have been a stronger conclusion if Nora served as the Black Flash in this story. There are also a few nitpicky things I had a problem with. It's really funny how the writers had to come up with a way for this story not to end in 2 episodes, so they just kind of had the forces do nothing until the plot needed them to. Dion makes an empty threat to change the future and then stands still until episode 9. This dude is the most ridiculously powerful force out of all of them, and he does not a darn thing the whole time. Psyche also doesn't start messing with his old friends until we need him to so we can find him. Why did Nora need Dion to find the other forces and beat them? If they all have a connection, shouldn't she be able to find them herself? I guess she needed him to trap them in time, but I bet you she was fast enough to kill all of them on her own. And then she loses him somehow and has to continue looking for him. They totally wasted out Forza from the comics and took away her power to control gravity, but I'm not stressing too much. Why was Psyche at Barry's old home looking creepy for no reason? How is Barry supposed to fight the Speed Force if he's powered by it? We're shown earlier in the season that she can give him a boost, can't she just take the power away from him too? And last but not least, do we really need to have this lame Frost and Chilll blame fight? They have this long and pointless conversation. I promise you, he's not that hot. Alright, I've ranted about a lot of things that I don't like in the season, but there are a few things that I do like. I like the fact that Joe had his own antagonist to deal with this season. I like it better when he's active and using his wisdom to guide characters because he has some of the best dialogue in the Arrowverse. Seeing him have the ideological back and forth with Kramer was fun to me, and I would have liked it if he at some point turned Kramer's cold heart around, but they just decided to throw away this conflict for whatever reason. I hope that this storyline about Kramer cracking down on metahumans keeps going throughout the rest of the season. I enjoy it because it makes the city feel like it's alive and responding to the things going on with real consequences. Of course they would want to take care of the metahuman problem after the traumatic experience most of the city just had. It reminds me of how Gotham is involved as its own character in most Batman stories. Before now, all Central City ever did was get attacked, have a flash day, and name a signature coffee after Barry. I also appreciate the show giving reasonable send-offs to Cisco and Harrison Wells. While Timeless Wells is a little confusing when you think about it, it's a neat idea to keep him in the show ready to return at any moment. Cisco on the other hand has a whole arc dedicated to him coming to terms with moving on with his life, and it makes sense because he has been there for so long with not much else to do but be Barry's personal science guy. It surprises me how much of this series has been inspired by Joshua Williams' run The Flash because it's so recent. Godspeed, Bloodwork, The Speed Force Storm, Black Hole, The New Forces, all things introduced by Joshua in the Rebirth era that I didn't expect to be seen introduced until much later down the line. Most of the time the adaptations are changed to fit the show to be a bit more dramatic, of course, but sometimes these changes turn out to do some good for the characters. For example, in the comics, Ramsey was just some crazy coroner for the CCPD that didn't really have a motive outside of wanting to take some blood from metahumans in order to gain his own powers. The show's version of Ramsey actually gives him some character and a more interesting reason to be a villain. Overall, this first half of season 7 was pretty lacking, not gonna lie. I wasn't really behind all the weird family dynamics going on, and the showrunners really try to brush things under the rug and hope you're not smart enough to notice how dumb it all sounds. I'm actually looking forward to the second part of this season since we haven't had a speeder-centric season in a while. Godspeed seems to be the new big bag and I'm interested to see what they'll do with him. He's missing the dynamic that him and Barry had in the comics that made me like him in the first place, but hopefully they have something else up their sleeve to make him compelling. I'm excited to see Jordan Fisher as Impulse with whatever storyline they have for him, and I hope he becomes a series regular because the series could use some light-hearted characters with Cisco gone. I love his comic accurate suit even though this poster makes him look silly as hell. That's all for my rant today. I don't want to get too negative. I guess I'll get more into reviewing the Arrowverse shows as I catch up on them. I'll definitely make a video about Black Lightning's final season. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.